Hey YouTube, got a little stuff to show you now. Got one reservoir sanded up, sized up, almost ready to go, huh? And what I'm doing now is doing all the drilling and tapping and all the prep work that I have to do. I just wanted to show you some of the stuff that goes into it. All these parts have been precisely marked. They've got little prick points on them. I use this kind of car wax. I smear it all over the bit. I know this seems like, why? But it really does help. And every little bit you can do. So every time I drill a hole, I wax the bit. It takes a little bit of time, right? But it's worth it. Here's my little jig all glued up, ready to go. I'm going to head over to the router and make the little round parts pretty soon. This is the way the top gets drilled to receive the little recessed port. Here's the drill holes on the back. Okay, everything's been marked, oriented, it all lines up, everything fits. This has been sanded to 320. I'll hit this up to 600 and polish it before I start putting stuff together, but that's really the only part that has to get polished. Everything else just gets stuck together at this point, and then I do the face, which I have again, a router template for. I trim it, bevel it, sand it, polish it, and it gets stuck on last. So, there you have it, little progress report. As you can see, my prototype is extremely handy. Prototype I made and slipped into my Cooler Master Cosmos shell over here. It helps me get very precise layout. I know that everything's going to fit exactly right. This unit is exactly the same size as this unit. So I'm able to transfer my measurements and gather information. I just thought I'd show you how I'm tapping these little holes. After each deal, I clean out the tap, get the plastic out of it. I roll a little wax up onto the whole deal here. Basically it. Clean it, and wax it, and repeat. Alright, next thing I'm up to here is making the tiny parts safely on the router without losing fingers, getting more nasty scars when I was young and inexperienced. Anyway, just showing you what I do here. Maybe you can get some idea of why these reservoirs take so much time. Because for me, it's not about how fast can I make a reservoir. It's about, can I make a reservoir correctly? And there's more to it than you might think. If you try to make a watertight box, you're going to want every part to be as perfect as possible, because it'll be a lot less aggravation later on when you start gluing things up and things don't line up and don't fit and things aren't square. This side's open, that side's closed, blah, blah, blah. You've got to see all of that and avoid all of that. Every little step takes time. So it's better if I make several at once, because once you start doing something, obviously, if you're drilling, you want to do all the holes. If you're routing, you want to route all the parts, etc. But since I'm getting ready to tap ports, I have to have this part, because guess what? It's a port. I gotta tap it. Now, this goes on over here to the router. Too much fun, huh? Plug this bad boy in and see what happens. how you make a perfectly round, tiny part, and then I'm going to drill a port right in the center of it. So there you have it. It helps to have things like this to facilitate that. Then there's another routing step. This one has a little 1/8 inch round over on it. That's going to help the flow go over this cap. So I got to go around this baby that I just routed with the flush trim bit, the little tiny laminate router. And we're almost there, because this part is now going to get sanded and polished while it's still on the jig, make it life a lot easier for me. And yet more attention to this tiny little part. These little recessed ports, they're not hard to make exactly, but they're extremely time consuming to make, because you got to do all these steps. Cut it, route it again, sand it, polish it, and I drill it, and I tap it, and finally I glue it onto the other piece. So there's quite a few steps. Odd to think that this one little part of the reservoir, the part that allows you to slip it in and out of the case and have a fill port, is the part that takes a lot of time. Who'd have thunk it? As you can see, I'm just going around it with some 400 here. Get off the router marks. Okay, because this part's going to be wet all the time. Any micro scratches that show up on it are not that critical. So whatever the buffing wheel takes out and puts on will be enough. I don't have to go totally crazy with it. Yeah. Alright. And on to the buffing wheel. Alright, as you can see, I've accumulated a huge amount of crap on the bench again, despite having cleaned it earlier in the week. But let's get on to the buffing. The blue cuts the best, so that's what I start with. Okay. Thing about buffing, okay, not too much wax, but you don't want to burn it. You got to keep moving. Keep moving the part all the time. You do not want to just concentrate in one area for any length of time. You'll just burn it. So you just keep moving around, and the abrasive and the heat and the flapping cotton basket there will eventually restore this thing to optical clarity. Okay, as you can see, that's looking pretty spiffy. Okay, and the final little thing I do is I head over to the white wheel. Tilt that camera up and you just see what I'm up to. This is a different compound. This is for finishing. The final blast on it. Basically just go around it. And this takes out any tiny little marks that are left by the blue. Kind of like finer grits of sandpaper. And even though you might have thought the other one was looking good, it just looks better and better. And you just don't have to do much with this, because just like with finer grits, you do a whole lot of sanding with the coarse grit, and then you do less and less sanding with each grit, because most of your work's already done. And I'm doing things here that I would not recommend a novice do, like moving this piece of wood all over the wheel like this, because if you aren't comfortable with the idea of a spinning wheel slapping something like this directly into your nutsack, don't do that. So here, let's take a look. it is very clear, especially for an internal part that's going to be wet all the time. You're never going to see it. It's just a little step I take. We're not done with the little block yet, guys. Still more stuff. So here, this is how I drill the port safely. Right? So I'm going to have an accident, so I'm using a... Don't want anything to get away from you when you're running a drill press. If it binds up in it, the whole thing will just spin around, and it'll either hurt you or it could break your jig or ruin your piece or whatever. So basically, that gets clamped in there and brought over to the drill press. Okay, now let's see if I can do this without screwing up this piece of work I just spent so much time on. Sound is the sound of success. It's the sound of right through the center of my doodad. The doodad, it took me half an hour. How long did it take? And obviously the real test is once you've made the part, tapped it, everything, you got to test it with a fitting. This is just the fill port, so just got to make sure you can really crank that bastard down without tearing the threads out, and you can. I'm a pretty strong guy. And then you inspect it all the way around like this on the edge. Just make sure it's got the totally flat, you know, and you know you've gotten a good true port. Alright, so I'm finally done with one of these little fiddly parts. Now I got to go do it again. Okay, so to finally be done with this little tiny part, put a cap in it, center it in the hole, and then I do the capillary bond as best as it can. If it will, it'll oblige. And just get glue all the way around it and get away from it. It's extremely humid today. Rained all night. Misty all morning. It's hot now, so I'm hoping that that will help me. Now, it's very difficult to tell if that did what I wanted it to, but once that glue finishes doing what it's done, I'll flip it over and do it from the other side. But I don't want to move it yet because the glue run all over the top and make an ugly streak. So, let's wait for a little bit.